All right. Today we are having a technical review of the marine fish and invertebrates for Oregon's State Wildlife Action Plan. And next slide, please. So here's a little overview for what we're planning to do today. We're just going to welcome everyone and set the stage. We're going to give you a brief overview of the assessment criteria that were used for this for our State Wildlife Action Plan, review of the species assessment outcomes for the marine fish and invertebrates, and a little review of the types of feedback we have received, although most of it so far has been for other taxon. And then we're going to open it up to questions and discussion, and then finally talk about some of our next steps. One thing that I will let everyone know is that this meeting is being recorded, and we will do our best to take notes today as well, but we are going to ask you to use our feedback forms for providing input to us. That's an overview of what we're planning to do today. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So good afternoon, everyone. As we get started, I want to provide a refresher on the three broad categories of swap species. ODFW used a process intended to be transparent, robust, and repeatable to identify species included within our swap. We'll walk you through each of the categories up here on the screen to provide better information on what these classifications mean, how we're using them, and how you can help refine our draft. Our species of greatest conservation concern are those that we have identified as having imperiled conservation status, and are what we previously referred to as strategy species. The name change, similar to the name change of the plan, will help us be more in line with national terminology and facilitate the use of our plan by our partners that cross state boundaries. The next big group is our species of greatest information need, or SGIN. These are species for which we just don't know enough to determine their status. And these were previously referred to as data gap species. Now, in the nearshore portion of our, what used to be the nearshore strategy, we didn't really have a data gap category. So any of the species that are identified in this SGIN are new on the nearshore side. Our third group is other. And there are a number of ways that we are including species that aren't either SGIN or SGCN within the revised swap. As we all know, there are species that are key to informing conservation actions in the state that may not fall neatly within either of the two previous categories. Next slide, please. So to inform our discussion of outcomes, let's have a look at the criteria for selection of SGCN. Staff led a comprehensive process to revise the criteria for selection of species of greatest conservation need in 2023. The conservation criteria were developed based on those used in 2016, with changes to make them inclusive of all taxa. In previous iterations, different criteria were used for different taxonomic groups, which can become confusing. The end result was 4 criteria were applied to all potential SGCN, and species assessed must meet 2 or more of those 4 criteria to be included as an SGCN. The criteria are intended to identify species that are most at risk in Oregon and for which timely implementation of conservation measures to address existing or potential threats is needed for delisting or to prevent them from declining to the point of qualifying as threatened or endangered. As a reminder, the Oregon SWAP is non-regulatory. Likewise, the species designation of SGCN or SGIN are non-regulatory, but they're a means to guide conservation priorities and actions in the state. Next slide, please. Since today's focus is on our SGCN, I want to dig in even further into the language of each of the four criteria. And again, they had to meet two of these four. Criteria 1, broadly, is that a species is vulnerable to threats due to its life history, traits, or ecological characteristics. An example would be the soup-fin shark with its inherently low reproductive rates, given that it's giving birth to live young pups only once every 3 years. Okay, next slide, please. The next criteria presented here in full is that the population is low or declining, either in the ecoregion or statewide. An example here would be a species like the kit fox or pygmy rabbit with very low population sizes in the state, or Pacific sardine, which have been declared overfished by the National Marine Fisheries Service. Next slide, please. The third criteria is that the species is at risk because of its restricted distribution. For this criteria, think of a species like an abalone that live only in rocky substrate habitats in a very narrow depth range. Next slide, please. And finally, we have the fourth criteria. The population is vulnerable to major threats like diseases, invasive species, climate change, or pollution. With the rise of impacts from climate change, new emerging diseases, and spread of invasive species, this particular criteria was one that we had to be thoughtful with applying. An example are sea otters that are vulnerable to oil fouling of their fur. They're also vulnerable to chemical contaminants. Another example would include Dungeness crab that are vulnerable to climate change and related effects in our nearshore waters. Next slide, please. Now that we've outlined the four criteria for SGCN, I want to briefly touch on the other species category before we go into our species outcomes. Other species, there are a number of species with secure populations that don't meet criteria for SGCN or SGIN, but there is other reason for us to focus on conservation actions on the species. We want to make sure that these species too are described in the revised SWAP, and we can provide information about them to help support our partners and the public interest in advancing conservation. American beaver is often used as the prime example. It was assessed for inclusion on the list of greatest species of greatest conservation need, but under those four criteria, but they were not found to meet the definition of an SGCN under these criteria. With the recognition of the important role beaver play in modifying habitats and benefiting other species, ODFW will address beaver in multiple areas throughout the revised SWAP. Similarly, in the marine environment, we specifically looked at criteria specific to the nearshore ecoregion that included that include if a species meets at least one of the SGCN criteria and also meets one or more of two other nearshore criteria. One, that it has ecological importance, like Pacific herring, for example, which are an important trophic link between the primary and secondary producers and the higher order predators. Or two, it has economic, social, and or cultural importance in the nearshore. So species like Pacific lamprey or Chinook salmon, for example, are not only SGCN, but also qualify in the other category based on those criteria. Next slide, please. So our ask is for partners to provide technical information. The draft of species that have been assessed to date by ODFW is presented in the marine fish and invertebrates spreadsheet, similar to the spreadsheets that are provided for the herps, the plants and algae, the mammals, and so that's the one that this meeting is about. For species in these draft lists, we are looking for technical partners to review the profiles for factual accuracy, missing information, and being current. For any proposed changes or additions, we ask that reviewers submit peer-reviewed references and supporting materials that can help inform final decisions. We recognize the value of traditional and cultural information in addition to scientific data. Finally, we're looking to technical reviewers to identify any information needs or action critical to the conservation of the species. The SWAP is a document that's widely available and heavily used, with over 120,000 unique users each year. If partners can help us to make sure we have high quality information on threats, conservation actions, this information can go to help support effective conservation by practitioners around our state. Next slide, please. So this is the online feedback form and what it looks like. And we would like you to provide your comments and supporting references as soon as possible, as soon as you're able to do so, but no later than April 4th, 2025 for the SGCN and SGIN specific comments. And part of the reason for that is that it will take us some time to go through those and incorporate that. And we will have meetings going on for other types of things. And we don't want to provide a flood of information either to you or get too much information coming back to us so we don't get overwhelmed, and it goes both ways. So we'll come back to this forum a little bit later. Next slide, please. Okay, with this background in mind, we are now looking to you and the ask we have from you is to the species lists and profile document for the SGCN and SGIN that were made available prior to this meeting. We're asking for your help principally on the ecoregion designations, which is pretty simple for most of these fish because they're all in the nearshore ecoregion. The special needs, the threats, the conservation actions, and when making suggestions whenever possible, again, please provide appropriate peer-reviewed references and published sources. Now, I will say one thing about the list that is there. Because this meeting is specific to the marine environment, I've lumped a lot of the anadromous fishes, and so the ecoregions for some of those salmonid runs in particular. Um, all of the ecoregions are probably listed, and some of those salmonid runs only go to specific ecoregions. And unfortunately, our inland fish person, Michelle Weaver, wasn't able to join us today because she's on sitting on a jury. But so just know that when you look at the document, and when we actually get it to go online, it'll be more similar to what you see now on the conservation strategy website, where yes, there's a species page, but it lists all of those salmonid runs, and then you go to each particular one, and it has the ecoregions there. So don't be confused by that. Next slide, please. So as we get into the marine fish and the SGCN outcomes, we assessed 43 different species. There were 19 that qualified or were listed as SGCN in the draft, and 2 of them are new. The Pacific sardine, which, as I mentioned, has been declared overfished, and the soup fin shark, which is on the IUCN red list and a candidate under the ESA. Next slide, please. For the SGIN outcomes, there were 43 species assessed on the marine fish again, and 9 species, the grass rockfish, pile perch, red surf perch, rock greenling, shiner perch, starry flounder, tiger rockfish, and top smelt were all listed as SGIN. We really don't have enough information about those species, and so those are things that would be great to get more information about. Next slide, please. On the marine invert side, 17 species were assessed. 15 of those species, including 3 new ones, were designated as SGCN. The 3 new ones include the morning sunstar, the striped sunstar, both of which were heavily affected by sea star wasting disease, and the pinto abalone. Next slide, please. So for the SGCN review, again, you want to be looking at the ecoregions, the information on special needs, the threats and limiting factors, the data gaps, and the conservation actions. And you can review all of that stuff that is in that Marine Fish and Invertebrates SGCN March 2025 spreadsheet that is available on the SWAP revision page, and provide comments, references, and resources through the revision website by April 4th. Next slide, please. Okay, let's see. So for the SGIN, again, the information needs are basically on things like distribution, population trends, habitat needs, threats and limiting factors. They are also listed in that spreadsheet. And again, please provide comments with references through the revision website. And again, by April 4th. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move to the discussion, but before we do that, I'll just tell you a little bit about the types of feedback that we have received for a number of different species. We've gotten some information with mapped climate change scenarios for some species, some new and emerging reference materials and references. and some information specifically about species adaptive capacity assessments that have been done, and some additional information needs, suggested things for some of those additional data gaps.